What's up, Internet? Today I want to talk a little bit about a group of snakes that I think are really cool and kind of underappreciated, although I think they're really starting to come into vogue. Well, not as quickly as I would like, but I think they're starting to grow in popularity a little bit, and that is the Asian rat snakes. It makes up, there are quite a few different genuses, and we'll talk about a few of them on this list. And obviously, king snakes, not Asian rat snakes, but I want to talk about 5 good Asian rat snake species that would be good for pets. There are plenty out there that are absolutely amazingly stunning, like the mandarin rat snakes and the beauty snakes, but they aren't necessarily the best pet snakes. So when I start talking about this, and I'll talk a little bit about each one as we go along, but that is about, thinking about what makes a good pet snake. So availability, the cost, the handleability, the care requirements. So all of those are things to think about that are really cool. Like for instance, mandarin rat snakes, absolutely amazing. They're pretty handleable, but as of right now, no one's really breeding them captively, at least not readily or with a whole lot of success. So a lot are still imports, and imports come with a whole lot of issues and things like that. Beauty snakes and king rat snakes, they are amazingly beautiful animals. They don't usually cost too much, but they're very flighty, and their care requirements are actually not that difficult when compared to like an Asian rat snake, or not an Asian, a king rat snake, or even like rainbow boas. And I know those aren't rat snakes, but I'm just talking about specifically reptiles that need a little bit more, a little bit higher regard, a little bit higher care level than just kind of a nice easy pet. So 5 ones that I'm going to talk about today. All the care requirements are fairly simple. Asian rat snakes, they're all cooler weather reptiles, so that means that you don't need that like high 90s or even mid 90s basking spot. Like the mid to high 80s is a good high temp for pretty much every single one on this list. So without further ado, we'll get started on that 5 good Asian rat snakes for pets. The first one is, it might possibly be my favorite snake on this list. It's a dream snake, and I don't have it yet, but I really hope one day, and that is the Moellendorff's rat snake, or the 100-flower rat snake. These things are gorgeous. So they're at the top of the list, and once again, this is not the 5 best, period. These are just 5 choices that I think are good. Not necessarily top 5, that's it, period. So this one might be the hardest to come by, because not too many people are breeding them here in the States. They are, but I see a lot more UK breeders actually messing with them and working on those projects there. I think Brian Barczyk used to breed them back in like the early 2000s, but I know there's some people out there, and maybe this year or next I might be able to get a hold of a pair, fingers crossed. They're not terribly expensive, especially when you think about like, the crazy high combo morphs of ball pythons or even boa constrictors or things like that, but still a few $100s for a single animal. They are available captive bred, and I don't know if they're imported or not anymore, but everyone that I've ever seen is captive bred, which is really nice. That being said, they are the largest snake on this list. Like it is, they are without a doubt the largest ones. Animals easily obtain close to 8 feet with regularity, so it's a very large rat snake. Not as long as, say, the some of like the midland Asiatic rat snakes that are huge, get over 10-12 feet long, which arguably are as long as king cobras and stuff like that, or even the king rats, they can get bigger. But these guys are really cool. So why they're called the 100-flower rat snake is because it looks like there's hundreds of little flowers that model up their really cool background, with that starkly beautiful head that just goes all the way down to the body, and it's just a really cool, striking snake that most people don't even really realize exists right now. They're really cool. And as far as temperament goes, they can be kind of flighty, and a lot of the Asian rat snakes are fairly flighty. They're all slender-bodied, colubrid snakes, all fairly semi-arboreal, with the exception of one on this list that I will talk about once we get to it. And they're really cool. So when you think about an enclosure for a very large semi-arboreal snake, you're going to want to have at least a 6-foot enclosure for that animal, which is another reason why I'm not there yet. I could get a juvenile, just a little neonate, and then start it out in like a little tub, and then eventually to a large Christmas tree tub, then to a 4x2, and then eventually 6-foot vision cage or PVC, whatever that is. But I want to be able to have the room to appropriately accommodate for that animal, so that's why I don't have it yet. So, moving right on the line to the next one that I think is really, really cool. So, sorry, I only actually have 2 of these that I will be able to show you, but we'll have lots of pictures, so that works really well. And that is the Russian rat snake. And the Russian rat snake, I think, is a very underrated species that I don't see come up terribly often, which is a real shame because they're amazing animals. So to start that with, it's actually what the species name is a Elaphe shrenki or shrenkai. So the Elaphe is one of the genuses that makes up quite a few rat snakes, mostly Old World, but there are a few New World rat snakes that are part of that Elaphe genus as well. And the shrenkai is in relation to the biologist who I believe discovered it, or at least did a lot of work in that genus or something like that. But the fact that they call him the Russian rat snake is a little bit misleading because that's only one small part of their range. They actually make up a lot of Northeast Asia. So they're in China, Mongolia, parts of Korea, and then just a little bit of Russia. So they have a whole lot of actual other names, kind of like with the 100-flower and Moellendorf rat snake. These guys, like a lot of colubrids that I have come to find, have a bunch of names. So there's the Amur rat snakes, the Siberian rat snake. So kind of like the Siberian tigers and Amur tigers, they're the same thing. They just recently started to call them Amur over Siberian. It's like that with these two, because it makes up the region, not just Siberia, which is, typically when you think of super, super cold. There's the Manchurian black water snake, the Manchurian black racer. They have all these crazy names, which is really funny because it's just the naming and the taxonomy of, specifically with rat snakes, is always just absolutely insane to me. Why people just go on and on and on about these things, and they can never really make up their minds about that. So this animal is really cool. They're actually one of the most docile, as far as I'm aware. I've never actually worked with a full-grown adult, but everything that I've researched, people that I talk to who have them, it's a very docile, very handleable arboreal rat snake. And I say arboreal, it gets thrown around a lot. True arboreal, you're thinking green tree python, emerald tree boa that literally sits there. Semi-arboreal, you're thinking like a carpet python or even a boa constrictor that, as even heavier bodied adults, they will still spend a large time in the trees. These guys, they can be fairly arboreal, but they're found kind of all over the place, which is also really cool. That we'll get to that in just a second. So they're born kind of this brownish, muddy color with kind of creamy yellow stripes, and as they get older, they go through an autogenetic change like a lot of reptiles do. So as an example, the green tree pythons, they're born yellow or red, and they eventually turn that stark green color. And yes, there are a lot of exceptions to that with selective breeding and island locales or whatever may have you. But eventually they turn into this dark, almost jet black snake with still those kind of creamy yellowish bandings. They do have a pure melanistic phase, where that means that it's entirely jet black. And now through captive breeding and selective breeding, we have them that basically they almost look like a little miniature Boelen's python, where they're jet black and then bright yellow like under the chin and then stripes down that, which looks absolutely really, really cool. So it's like a little miniature Boelen's python that you can actually handle regularly and isn't as delicate and fragile, although with Boelen's pythons as a whole are subject, and we're not going to get into that. So these guys are incredibly hardy animals. They get between 4.5, close to 6 feet long, which is a pretty big size snake. Thinking of a rat snake, where a lot of rat snakes are usually in that 4 to 5 foot range, so they can get a little bit bigger. They're a little bit heavier body, but still fairly slender. They like to move around. And so when I say they're very hardy, they can tolerate temperatures and climate extremes that a lot of other snakes can't. Again, talking a little bit about the Boelen's python. They have been found in elevations of over 6,000 feet in elevation, which is higher here than some parts of Colorado. Yes, we have a lot of 14ers and peaks and stuff like that, but still. Mile high is 5,280, so over 600. So that's pretty high. They can be found in swamps and in wetland areas, in grassy plains, in woodland areas, found in trees over 50 feet in the air. They have been found in rocky hillsides. They have been found in farmland. They are very opportunistic, very generalistic, kind of like a New World, like Western, like a New World Plains rat snake or something, or an Old World Western rat snake, where they can kind of be just kind of anywhere. And they're actually, this is kind of not great, but it is interesting to think about, is they're actually an invasive species in the Netherlands. And so what that was, is the thinking goes behind it anyway, is that someone had to cut a few and release them when they couldn't take care of them any longer, thinking that they couldn't survive the winter in the Netherlands. You know, we're thinking of, you know, northwestern Europe. It's a Nordic technically country where it gets very cold. It snows in the winter. Well, turns out they do just fine. The whole Siberian rat snake should have been an indicator, but they survived. They established a breeding population, and now around the airport in the Netherlands, they have a growing population. And while it's not as big of a concern as, say, the Burmese pythons in Florida, it's still an invasive species that shouldn't be there. So, that being said, they do make wonderful, great pets because they can be very forgiving when it comes to husbandry. Just give them room, give them places to climb, and it should be said that with the exception of one of these, they're all really great display pets because, unlike some of the more cryptic animals that don't like to come out when stuff, once they get to a certain size and become comfortable with kind of the routine, they really don't care about being seen. They will just hang out all of the time during the middle of the day. They're usually mostly crepuscular like a lot of snakes, but I have seen animals just hanging out, basking, hanging on trees, cruising the tank, looking for food or looking for their basking spots at all hours of the day, which is really cool. So for like a ball python, most of the time, you're not going to see it. It'll be active and move around its enclosure at night when you're asleep, but these guys, they just will hang out, with the exception of one of these on the list, like I said. So, moving right down along, number 3. This is actually one that I do have that I really, really like. So, we're going to pull her out, and we've talked about her before. Oh, don't look like that. And we're just going to, boop, she's looking a little iffy at the moment. Here we go. So, the Rhino Rat Snake. These guys are absolutely stunning. So, the reason why that these guys are a little bit lower a little bit higher on the list than the Russian rat snakes is that they are a little bit more common. Yes, they are an oddball and they are a rarity, but I see the Rhino Rat Snakes, and have for a while now, appear on lists and availability a whole lot more often than any of the Russian rat snakes. The price can be a little bit about the same, other than like the melanistic rat snakes that obviously have a little bit higher of a price tag. But these guys are absolutely amazing. We did a whole species spotlight about them, anything. So, these guys go through an autogenetic change as well. They're born kind of a gray color and eventually turn this beautiful blue-green. And that can vary between like a super, super bright green to a more turquoise, depending on the locality between where they're found in kind of Southeast Asia. They're very arboreal, not necessarily entirely arboreal, but they do like to spend a lot of time up off the ground, but they will go down on the ground as well. That little fun little digit there that they have at the end of their face, no one is entirely sure why they have it. They think it's used for some sort of luring. So for instance, you know, with green tree pythons or some adders, they have a little tiny dinky tail that they use for caudal luring, which is they'll sit there and wiggle this little tail that looks kind of like a grub, which if you can see, the tip of it's a little bit of different color, it maybe look like a little bit of grub. They'll hold perfectly still and wiggle this little worm-looking tail, and then they'll come and grab a passing bird or whatever as it goes. And when you think of anglerfish, they have that thing that sits there and bounces and looks pretty and light, and a smaller fish will come up and they'll grab that. They think that might be used for the same thing, where they'll hold perfectly still and look like a bit of vine or a green stick, and then a bird will come along and then they'll grab that. They've also seen rhino rat snakes in water with it dipped down, thinking maybe that they're luring it like for fish. No one's really sure exactly why they have it, but it looks really cool. These guys supposedly, and I've done research on this, but she's my only one, they can be housed communally, giving a large enough enclosure and plenty of cover and places for them to hide, as well as bask and all those other things. So I know people who have successfully kept groups of 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 to 4 females to male ratio very successfully. They've been bred in captivity. In fact, High Plains herps, who originally got started here in Colorado. Used to work for a very famous reptile company until there was a very unfortunate tragic fire. They were, along with the Denver Zoo, the first people to actually successfully breed these guys in captivity. So Rhino Rat Snakes kind of have a little bit of a, a home love for me here. So as you can see, like a lot of rat snakes, they're a little flighty or a little uneasy when you first pick them up out of the tub, but very calm, very handleable. Definitely a display species, just like the other ones. Like I said, they will sit there and hang out and cruise on a vine or a stick or anything like that. Whatever you give them, they will hide. They have a really great feeding response, at least this little girl does, and I absolutely love them to death. So we're going to put her back, and then we'll talk about the next one on the list. Can I please let go? Okay, thank you. Maybe, possibly. Maybe, possibly. No. Okay, I'll bring the next one up. But, so, number 2 on this list. This is actually a genus of a species, and there's several different subspecies, and just based on their... It's really... I can't say their scientific name. I'll throw it up right here. But the Thai bamboo rat snakes. These guys are absolutely amazing, and there's basically 4 subspecies that we work with. I don't know too many people that are breeding them successfully in captivity, so a lot of them are imports or farm hatched, which that's a whole other topic that we won't really get into. But these guys are really cool. They're the smallest of the list. Females usually get around 2.5 to 3 feet, and they are stunningly beautiful snakes. That bright red, sometimes orange color with all the different patterns depending on the subspecies of the black on there. They're very beautiful snakes. So, that being said, they are still fairly inexpensive, usually around the $200 to $400 range, which sounds kind of like a lot, but once again, when you think about even like a piebald ball python, that's still around that price, if not a little higher. So it's in the good kind of pet range when you're thinking not investment quality snakes and not my first snake, but it's in there in between, which I think is a really good range, and that's where a lot of these ones are to begin with, is in that kind of pet price range. The only thing about these ones that make it a little bit difficult is that they stress out easily when it comes to temps. They are definitely a cool weather reptile. Anything over 85, similar to like Chinese cave geckos, can start to be very detrimental to their health. So they need to be kept cool, they need to be kept humid, which this actually might be the most difficult part if people aren't really used to a good way to keep their enclosures and their habitats at the correct humidity and temperature ranges, where it's hard to keep them cool and humid without getting stagnant. So a little bit of forethought needs to be kind of done, a little bit more research, talking to different people in the areas you are living in, because if you live in a place with very dry winters and summers, then that's a whole other battle that you have to deal with. But these guys are very, very terrestrial. They like to spend a lot of time hidden. They don't like to come out very well. So like I said before, this is that one species that isn't a great display species, but when out, it is absolutely amazingly beautiful. They don't get very large, so you don't need a very large enclosure. They do very well with low lighting, so still give them the 12-hour light cycle, but they do a little bit better with kind of low lights, because like I say, they are on the ground. They like to stay under a lot of debris, under a lot of, I don't want to say detritus because it sounds like trash, but it's kind of true. They like to dig through the leaf litter and look for small rodents and things like that way. That's why their noses are shaped a little bit more round. Through evolution, we've come to see that that's where like some of the more burrowing species, they either have kind of like a shovel nose, like the hog nose, or very round, not pointed one that makes it so it can easily move through loose substrate and find animals to eat. They're really, really cool. They're found at a decent altitude, nothing like, like the Russian rat snakes, but over 3,000 feet in elevation, because they're kind of found in parts of China where they're gets into the mountains. So think of similar as like giant pandas. Not quite that high, but the mountains of southern China, it's very green, it's very humid, there's kind of like that hanging mist. Like, we all get that picture in our heads, right? Similar to that, just not quite that high. It's still kind of a little bit further down. Southern China down into like Taiwan and that kind of area. They're really, really beautiful. So there's the Thai bamboos, there's the Thai red mountains, there's the broad banded, and then there's the Yunnan mountain. So, not the Thai, sorry, the Chinese bamboo. Blah, blah, blah. Those are the 4 different species. They're all really beautiful. They have all been worked with for a fair amount of time in the hobby, at least here in the States. I believe it's the Yunnan mountain or the Thai red. One of those two are the one that's been working with the longest. And I think they're the ones that are starting to have the most success with captive breeding. I don't know if that's entirely true. Someone can probably call me out down in the comments, but any who's will be. They're really great pets. The reason why they're a little bit lower down is because that they can be fairly handleable. They're not super, super flighty. They stay small. And as long as you know what you're doing and put a little bit of forethought into the enclosure and don't keep it too hot. So if you have central AC or a swamp cooler, you really don't have to worry too much about heating, which is kind of handy in a lot of ways. So the number one on this list, and he is going to absolutely prove me wrong when I talk about this a little bit when it comes to not being super flighty, because that's just what he does, the Japanese rat snake. So, hey buddy. So, the Japanese rat snake. We actually have 2 now. We got a little albino female to go with this guy who is possible het albino. So, these are what is probably the most common Asian rat snake outside of maybe like the beauty snakes that I see. They are usually on the lower end as far as price goes, with the exception of some localities more. So the albinos can be a little bit more pricier, and like the Kunashir Islands can be a little bit more on the pricier side, but still very affordable. These guys maintain a really good length. They can get about 4.5-ish feet long at a very, very large size. This guy is doing pretty well as far as growth goes. I love the coloration that they have, this kind of green turquoisey hue. Would you come here, please? Would you come here, please? And I love the kind of like eyeliner eye streak that they have on the sides right there. It looks absolutely amazing. And the pattern does kind of come through on the albinos as well. The Kunashir Island ones, they're usually a bit more like turquoisey. It's hard to find, there's not really like a true blue snake. But the Kunashir Islands are definitely ones that they have kind of a lasting turquoisey color. This guy was a little bit more kind of olive green when he was younger, and he's starting to get a little bit more blue. You can really see it there, kind of like right there, right where his belly scales are starting to merge into his rostral scales. No, that's not correct, rostral scales. That's his nose. But they are absolutely stunning. They have other ones that are called tiger or patternless. I don't really know why that is, because they kind of look like they have tiger banding, and I'm really glad that he calmed down. He's very flighty when he first comes out of his cage, but he doesn't really quick bite, which is what I want to talk about. So, like I said before, a lot of the rat snakes, they're very flighty, but they calm down pretty easily once handleable. When we did the species spotlight with this guy, he was all over the place the entire time because I literally woke him up, and he was not a happy camper about it. But as you can see, he's just hanging out, checking things out with those nice long tongue flicks. So, looking pretty good, not rattling his tail, because these guys will do that too, that mimicry of rattling the tail. It makes it sound scary. Which is odd, because there aren't rattlesnakes. There are vipers, but there aren't rattlesnakes in Japan. There's the habus, but whatever. They can be fairly arboreal. He does like to climb. The female, her current setup does have more ability for her to climb around, and so she absolutely makes use of that. And eventually he'll be moving into a larger Exoterra cage because, like I said, these guys do get a decent size, and they like to climb and move. So he will be moving into an Exoterra, I think the 36 by 18 or something like that. The larger one, not the really tall one, but still the larger one that you'd see a lot of time for some display animals. These guys are really, really cool. I think they're amazing, very underappreciated and underrated pet snakes. Like I said, he has absolutely no problems being out and about while I'm working in the room during the day, at night when I'm messing with the geckos, or anything like that. Once again, it's a cooler weather animal. Japan is kind of a cooler weather place. Yeah, there's Okinawa and Kunashir Island, a little bit more tropical, but it doesn't really get those high temps like a lot of the other types of snakes need, just like every other one on this list. So, hopefully you enjoyed this video. You got a little bit of an appreciation for some of these really amazing and beautiful animals. I'm getting super into colubrids, as I've said a number of times, and I really love the Asian rat snakes in particular. Hi there. Although Pitch Wolf is definitely have my heart at the moment. But once again, hope you enjoyed the video. Questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, let me know down in the comments. Hit me up on all the social media. Check us out on Patreon. Our new podcast, Keep Calm, It's Just a Snake podcast. If you have if you want to see anything in particular, please let me know, and I'll do the best what I can, or maybe just answer questions for you in the comments or via email. Hope you're having a great day, and we will check you next time.